There are Sith Lords whose names echo across the galaxy. Malgus, whose fury has reshaped entire city worlds. Darth Mar, whose mere presence could command fleets by his will alone. Darth Nox, whose rituals were known to devour all of the living. But every once in a while, a name doesn't echo. Sometimes, a name is etched in blood. Deep in the shadows of the Empire, there emerges another kind of Sith. One who does not roar across a battlefield. One who does not duel for glory. One who does not crave admiration or spectacle. A Sith Lord whose danger is quiet. A Sith Lord whose threat is not in their blade, but in their brilliance. A Sith who kills not by lifting a hand, but by sharpening machines, weapons of war, and the horrors that will kill millions. Some Sith are far worse the deeper you dive into legend. This is the story of Darth Mekhis, one of the most terrifying sleeper threats in all of Star Wars Legends. Mechis is a Sith that the Jedi feared not for her strength in the Force, not for her mastery of the lightsaber, not for some ancient power or some old prophecy, but for her mind. If you were a Jedi, there were many ways your life could end. You could fall in battle, you could be hunted, you could be corrupted, you could become overwhelmed by the dark side. But the absolute worst fate, one of the darkest fates any Jedi could ever suffer, was to be captured by Darth Mekhis. Not killed, not tortured, captured. Because very few beings in the galaxy understood what she did to her prisoners until it was far, far too late. She was not a warrior, she was an engineer of nightmares, a scientist who saw living things as raw materials, a Sith Lord whose creativity produced mass death on a scale even the Dark Council struggled to comprehend. And yet her story begins not with madness, or with corrupt ambition, or even with a hunger for power, but something more chilling. Purpose. Cold, logical purpose. Darth Mekhis did not revel in cruelty the way that many Sith did. She did not indulge in the theatricality of evil. She did not worship pain. She built, she studied, she invented, she refined, and to her, she perfected. She was the one Sith in the Empire who understood that to win a galactic war, the true battlefield was not fought with lightsabers, it was fought in the foundries, in the laboratories, in the factories, using the stars themselves. And through that understanding, Darth Mekhis became a foundational pillar of the Sith Empire's war machine, a mind Vitiate relied heavily on, yet feared to ever draw too close. This is the rise of Darth Mekhis, the Sith scientist, the architect of the Empire's greatest weapons, the creator of a fate worse than death, and the woman whose genius could make the galaxy itself feel sick, long before she created superweapons and horrors that scarred the minds of Jedi Masters. Darth Mekhis held one of the most powerful positions in the entire Sith hierarchy. Darth Mekhis held a seat on the Dark Council, presiding over the sphere of technology. This sphere, unlike the others, was not ceremonial. It was not decorative. It wasn't a department buried beneath layers of bureaucracy. The sphere of technology was the industrial heart of the Sith Empire. It oversaw military innovation, weapons manufacturing, cybernetics, starship development, experimental science, alchemical technological fusion, and the entire infrastructure that allowed the Empire to wage war on a galactic scale. If the Empire marched, her sphere fueled that march. If the Empire conquered, her machines carved the way. If the Empire killed, her weapons multiplied the kill. It is no exaggeration to say that without Mechis' inventions, the Galactic War would have been far shorter, and the Sith advance far weaker. But that kind of responsibility comes with a weight, and with great scrutiny, because Mechis wasn't just any Dark Council member, she was different. Most Sith on the Council governed through fear, charisma, or overwhelming power, but Mechis governed through something more unsettling: efficiency, necessity. She didn't fight for her position. She didn't duel rivals in the halls of Ka City. She didn't plot coups or challenge Vitiate's authority. She simply produced, relentlessly, brilliantly, terrifyingly, and that made her both indispensable and dangerous. The Sith Emperor Darth Vitiate, one of the most ancient and calculating beings in existence, is known for surrounding himself with puppets, zealots, and malleable pawns. He invests trust into absolutely no one, unless their loyalty is proven through ritual, domination, and spiritual enslavement. But Darth Mekhis was something that could not be entirely controlled. She wasn't deeply tied to the ancient Sith and their mysticism. She wasn't part of the secret cults. She never stood in the ritual chambers of Nathema or of Drome and Kas. She was not involved in the Emperor's psychic schemes or immortality projects. Emperor Vitiate's trust in her only went as far as her usefulness. She was kept at a distance, not elevated, not embraced, not spiritually bound. Because Vitiate fears two kinds of Sith above all other breeds: those he cannot predict, and those who can create without him. Darth Mekhis was both. She was not driven by ego, theatrics, or glory. She was driven by the compulsion to invent, to iterate, to refine, to push Sith weaponry into uncharted territory. She was the one Sith who didn't need the ancient secrets to change and alter the galaxy. She didn't need relics or rituals or forbidden knowledge. She could create power, real, lethal, industrial power with her own hands. That made her too valuable to remove, too brilliant to replace, too dangerous to embrace. Vitiate kept her on the council because this war machine needed her, but he never allowed her into his inner circle because he understood exactly what she was capable of becoming if left completely unchecked. And he was right. Because when the Sith Empire struck deep into Republic space, when the war escalated into brutality across thousands of worlds, and when the Dark Council needed someone to develop new technologies to fuel the final push, it was Darth Mekhis that they turned to. It was her brilliance that allowed the Empire to strip worlds of resources. It was her machines that harvested power on impossible scales. It was her innovations that enabled Sith legions to march farther and to strike harder. It was her designs that shaped the fleets used on Alderaan, used on dozens of other forgotten worlds and battlegrounds. Her inventions killed millions. Her mind turned entire star systems into supply chains for the Empire. Her calculations determined the fate of worlds. And to the Jedi, she became something that they rarely encountered. She was a Sith whose greatest threat was not her fanaticism, but her logic. A Sith who didn't hate them, but who could destroy them far more efficiently than those that truly did. A Sith whose genius was so vast, so cold, that even Vitiate watched her with caution. This is where our story turns to the forgotten frozen world of Rhen Var, and this is where Mechis steps onto a battlefield that she never wanted, but one of her inventions would speak louder than her blade. When Darth Mekhis set her eyes on Rhen Var, she did not see a frozen wasteland. She did not see a forgotten world at the edge of the galaxy. She did not see a strategic location filled with mineral wealth or even hidden temples and lore. She saw something more valuable. She saw a laboratory, a blank canvas, a cold, desolate world that she could carve into any shape of her imagination. A place where life was so thin, so quiet, so fragile, that it offered no resistance to what she intended to build. The Republic believed that the Sith were conquering Rhen Var for territory, for position, for military staging and strategy. But Darth Mekhis had no interest in those things. She wanted the planet because it was perfect for testing something else, for testing death. No witnesses, no population centers, no diplomatic complications, no oversight. Just the silence of the ice, and the freedom to create weapons that should have never existed. From the moment she landed, the transformation began. Rhen Var became an extension of her mind, an outdoor experiment chamber the size of an entire world. Her engines drilled deep into the ice, carving out labs beneath the surface. Her machines harvested what little thermal fissures to power external technologies that they could. Her soldiers dragged captured beings into impossible conditions to test new weapons on living organisms. And then she started deploying prototypes across the landscape. The Chaos Sphere warheads, designed to destabilize matter on a subatomic level. The Necro Swarm colonies, alchemical tech hybrids that behaved like killing living plagues. Weaponized toxins released into forest regions, doing so in order to study how quickly they could kill scouts, soldiers, animals, and yes, Jedi. Rhen Var was no longer a world. It was a crime scene. A petri dish of Sith ambition and science. A place where the snow was stained not with blood, but with the intent behind it. The intent of a brilliant mind calculating how best to exterminate life. Word eventually reached the Republic. The Jedi felt a disturbance, a sickening wrong vibration flowing through the Force. It was not like Malachor V, not like Nathema. It was not a wound yet, but it was a bruise, a spreading ache, a planet whose future was being shaped into a design meant to kill. Cold, systemic, unfeeling. Rhen Var was becoming hers, and that could not be allowed. Not because the Republic cared about the planet itself or its territory. They launched their assault because they understood something else. If Darth Mekhis is allowed to dig in, if she is allowed to learn, if she is allowed to experiment, she will perfect death. She will create weapons that make armies irrelevant. She will birth devices that make entire battalions obsolete. She will build machines that will do in seconds what Sith struggled to do with the Force in years. So the Republic did not invade Rhen Var to win a battle. They invaded to win the war. 4 Jedi Knights led the assault, all of them former apprentices of Master Nagani Zo, Satele Shan, Jarek Kaden, Sayo Bakarn, Bella Kowix. They marched with the 45th Battalion across the snowfields where the wind carried the faint echo of mechanical screams. Scouts died by the dozens, suffocating in clouds of poison gas that Mechis had sprayed over the forests simply to observe how long organic nervous systems could survive its exposure. The reports were so horrific that even hardened Republic soldiers trembled. The Jedi knew exactly what was happening. Mechis wasn't killing for victory. She was killing to learn, to refine, and to perfect. And every minute that she remained on the planet, the Sith Empire became more dangerous. The Jedi could not let this happen. The Republic couldn't let it happen. The Force here was wrong. So they did not merely attempt to hold back the Sith's advance. As Satele Shan said, "We're not going to hold them off. We're going to push past them and march to the black heart of our enemy." The Jedi were not here to liberate a world. They were extracting a cancer before it metastasized into galactic annihilation. And so their charge began. A desperate run across frozen death towards a mountain fortress where Mechis sharpened her mind against the bones of the fallen. Inside the fortress, Darth Mekhis watched battlefield projections with the calm detachment of a surgeon. Her command reported 600 casualties in 5 minutes, but Rhen Var remains under our control. Mechis barely reacted. Instead, she activated the Chaos Sphere in the Necro Swarm, ordering them deployed across the battlefield to study the effects on Jedi physiology. Outside, the Republic was dying. Inside, the Sith was learning. But the Jedi were quickly closing in. And when the doors to her chamber exploded inward, shattered by a single unstoppable surge of a Force push, Darth Mekhis realized that she was about to face something that she could not study, something that could not be graphed, measured, or perfected. She was about to face Satele Shan. Satele was a prodigy and a warrior, not a scientist, the embodiment of everything that Mechis' science sought to surpass. What followed was a duel unlike most in Star Wars lore. For once, the Jedi was the apex predator, and the Sith is the one fighting for her life. Mechis lashes out first with lightning, tearing metal from the walls with telekinesis, fighting with a raw desperation. But Satele dismantled her. Strike after strike, the Jedi overwhelmed her, cutting through layers of armor and cutting through the illusion that Mechis could stand against a true master of the blade. And then, with one decisive, measured blow, Satele maimed her, leaving the Dark Lady broken and bleeding on the floor, humiliated, defeated. Her weaknesses lay bare. The Republic won Rhen Var, but Mechis escaped, and her mind, wounded, humiliated, now burning with a true hatred for the Jedi that she did not possess before, she began to calculate something worse than battlefield innovation. Rhen Var had shown her her own limitations. The Cold War would remove them. The Republic believed the end of the Great Galactic War meant relief, a ceasefire, a pause, a chance for the galaxy to breathe and to heal. For most Sith, it meant the same. A moment to regroup, to rebuild, to prepare for the war's next chapter. But for Darth Mekhis, the end of the war was her beginning. Because of the Treaty of Coruscant meant to preserve peace, it did something far more dangerous. It rewarded her. It handed her the one gift she had never truly possessed before: space, freedom, and time. As a part of the negotiations, the Republic surrendered 7 seemingly useless Outer Rim systems. Dead, cold, barren worlds with no seemingly strategic value. But to the Sith, these planets were not valuable for what they were. They were valuable for who they were given to. One of the systems, the Vesa system, was granted personally by Emperor Vitiate to Darth Mekhis. Not just as territory, not as a military post, not as a bureaucratic assignment or even a reward. He gave it to her as a kingdom, a dominion, a private empire within the empire itself. He did it to see what she would build. Because Vitiate understood something about Mechis that many Sith did not. She was not powerful because she could kill. She was powerful because she could create. And so he gave her a domain in which to create freely. A section of Sith space ripped from the Republic, gifted entirely to her name, her authority, and her experiments. When she had once ruled a single icy planet as a frontline commander, she now ruled an entire star system unchallenged. An empire of labs, a kingdom of foundries, a realm where no Republic fleet dared to go, and no Jedi could reach her without crossing a border built on fear. This is the rise of Darth Mekhis. While war raged, she was dangerous. In peace, she became catastrophic. The Jedi Council understood this long before the Republic Senate did, though. They remembered the horror of Rhen Var. They had felt the way the Force shuddered under her influence. They understood that if Mechis were ever given the chance to dig in, to root herself into a world, to study uninterrupted, to perfect her science of killing, the next war would not just be bloody, it would be unwinnable. They sent one man into her domain, not to stop her, not to defeat her, but to observe and to learn. To watch her the way one watches a volcano, knowing that it will erupt, but hoping to understand the warning signs before it ever does. This Jedi's name was Nagani Zo. Zo had once been the master of Satele Shan. He was a man of peace, a man of compassion, a man who believed knowledge was the strongest weapon against the darkness. He entered the Vesa system alone. He left the Jedi Order for years. He posed as a slave. He hid among the workers of the mines and the labor pits where Mechis' prototypes were being tested. He crept through her construction sites. He listened to the whispers of the scientists and the Sith engineers who had become her disciples, and what he saw was enough to shatter the mind of even a great Jedi Master. For 10 years, he lived surrounded by Mechis' horrors. Jedi prisoners slowly converted into cybernetic thralls, rooms filled with twisted bodies in various stages of transformation, laboratories where the Force was sick, as if the halls are suffocating, the early stages of experiments that would later create the Sith Knights, prototypes for weapons built not to win battle, but to erase life. Every day he felt the system darken. Every month, the weight of her experiments pressed harder against the living Force and harder against his mind. Every year, he watched the Vesa system become something it was never meant to be. It became a machine designed to kill. And slowly, one memory at a time, Nagani Zo unraveled. When he finally escaped, he remembered only fragments, flashes of terror, glimpses of machines, echoes of screams, the haunting truth that Darth Mekhis was building something the Republic could not afford to face. He brought warnings, he brought them broken. His mind carried the scars of what he had witnessed. His spirit carried the weight of a system that felt like it was poisoning the Force. Now with her own kingdom, her own space, Vitiate's blessing, and the resources of an entire system at her disposal, Darth Mekhis was ready to create her masterpiece. A device inspired by ancient alien superstructures, a machine built around a star, a factory capable of producing multiple superweapons in a single year. She called it the Sun Razer. When Darth Mekhis emerged from the Great Galactic War with an entire star system to her name, she did not begin her work by designing starfighters, or even by refining Sith armor or tweaking blaster technology. She aimed higher, much higher. Because Mechis did not view war the way that most Sith did. Where others saw battles, fleets, and armies, she looked at it as equations, efficiencies, power curves, scaling potential. She didn't want to create weapons. She wanted to create infrastructure for an endless war. And so she built her masterpiece, the center of her private empire, the heart of her dominion, the engine that would change the galaxy if the Cold War ever ended. And she prayed for the day that it would. The Sunrazer, a forge built around a star. Deep within the Vesa system, Mechis sought out a very particular kind of star. Not all stars were suitable. Not all stars could handle what she intended to wrap around them. The Republic never understood the magnitude of this decision, but Mechis did. Darth Mekhis was recreating a legend. Centuries before, the ancient Rakata had built a superstation that they called the Starforge, a weapon factory hybrid that drew power directly from its star, producing ships, droids, and weapons with divine efficiency. Fueling itself with the dark side, the Starforge had nearly drowned the galaxy in ancient war. Mechis learned from it. She even improved it. The Sunrazer was not a replica, it was its evolution. Where the Starforge relied on vast force rituals and self-sustaining dark-side resonance, the Sunrazer was a mechanical miracle. It was a ring-shaped megastructure encircling a star, extracting stellar plasma as raw fuel, channeling radiation into industrial reactors, and using that power to manufacture superweapons at an impossible speed. This was not mythical, it was not alive, it was designed. It is the product of a mind that respected efficiency over philosophy. And because it was purely technological, it had one massive advantage over the Starforge. It could be reproduced. Mechis wanted 7 of them, one for each world ceded to the Sith in the Treaty of Coruscant. She only managed to complete a single one before her death, but that one was enough to terrify the Republic, because a Sunrazer had the output of a dozen shipyards and the destructive capability of a forbidden superweapon, all of it rolled into one. Under normal circumstances without the Sunrazer, the Sith Empire could build maybe one superweapon every few decades, maybe. But under Mechis, the Sunrazer produced 2 to 3 superweapons per year. Per year! That number should not exist in the lore, yet Vesa made it real. These are the weapons documented as having been built directly or indirectly through the Sunrazer's power. The Gauntlet. This was a hyperspace assault platform capable of attacking fleets from hyperspace itself. The Sith equivalent of a nightmare, a weapon that strikes before you ever know you're under attack. Theron Shan would later hunt this weapon down personally. Another vessel mass-produced by the Sunrazer is the Emperor's Shadow, a next-generation stealth vessel with superior cloaking. It could vanish not only from sensors, but from battle telemetry and energy scans as well. A warship that could sit in plain sight and kill silently. Then was the Undying, a super capital-class warship engineered for extreme durability. Built to survive planetary bombardments, ship-to-ship annihilation volleys, and even partial reactor breaches. This was a vessel that simply refused to die. The Ascendant Spear, one of the most terrifying weapons of the era, a hybrid between a dreadnought and a dark-side amplifier capable of channeling a Sith's powers directly into its systems. It was part ship, part conduit. Its lightning cannons could tear apart cruisers in seconds. This weapon alone could alter the balance of the war. The Silencer, a prototype long-range megalaser capable of destroying fleets in a single shot. While later iterations would appear in the Empire's arsenal, Mechis built the foundation of it. The Javelin Dreadnought, perhaps her most infamous line of warships outside of the Ascendant Spear. The prototype known as the Ror Jihan was capable of flash irradiating a planet's surface, a weapon designed to cleanse 3 kilometers of life in a single blast. This was not a bombardment tool, it was a sterilization device. And it is here that Mechis' philosophy is unmistakable. She wasn't designing weapons to fight the Republic, she was designing weapons to outgrow the need for battle. Weapons that would erase existence, end campaigns in hours, render fleets obsolete. This is why Vitiate gave her the system. This is why the Dark Council tolerated her. This is why the elite Sith were forced to keep her at a distance. Darth Mekhis was building not just tools of death, but an entirely new way to wage war. The Jedi did not fear these weapons merely because they were powerful. They feared them because of the speed that they were produced. They understood that Mechis was accelerating. Every month she grew more efficient. Every cycle she built faster. Every season she refined her production methods. And behind the weapons, beneath the shipyards, inside the labs woven throughout Vesa, she was working on something else. Something more personal. Something that required time, prisoners, and isolation. Something that no Sith had ever attempted on this scale. She called them the Sith Knights, a project so disturbing that even the Force recoiled, and a Jedi Master sacrificed his sanity attempting to monitor them. There are Sith who corrupt Jedi. There are Sith who torture Jedi. There are Sith who consume them, destroy them, or tear their minds apart. But Darth Mekhis did something no other Sith of the era dared ever attempt. She broke Jedi in a way that did not kill them, that did not corrupt them, but left them trapped, suspended between life and death, their spirits screaming silently inside a hollowed, mutilated body. The Sith Knights were not apprentices, they were not soldiers, they were not converts, they were Jedi who refused to turn, and that is exactly why she wanted them. Because to her, a Jedi who willingly chose the dark side was useless, predictable, a disappointment. But a Jedi who resisted, a Jedi who held on to the light, who clung to the code even as they were dragged before her, That was far more valuable. A spirit under conflict, a soul under torment, a light that could be trapped, smothered, suffocated, but not extinguished. The Sith Knights required a certain type of victim, a Jedi with a strong will. Because Darth Mekhis did not want obedience, she wanted tension, she wanted contradiction. She wanted a Jedi whose internal struggle could be harnessed like energy. She wanted a being whose identity was fractured, 1 foot in life, 1 foot in death, suspended on the edge of spiritual collapse. The process began with the body. Cybernetic plates grafted directly to the bone, sensory organs replaced with red ocular implants that stripped them of all individuality, voice modulators that erased their natural speech and voice, stealth field generators embedded into their spines, electrostaff weaponry hardwired into their neuromuscular structure. But the true horror is what she did to the mind. She rewrote the Jedi code. She twisted it, bent it, perverted it into something stripped of compassion and meaning, into a creed of submission and of servitude. Where the Jedi say, there is no emotion, there is peace, the Sith Knights whispered, there is no emotion, there is submission. Where the Jedi say, there is no ignorance, there is knowledge, the Sith Knights murmured, there is no ignorance, there is instruction. Where Jedi say, there is no passion, there is serenity, her creations believed, there is no passion, there is the task. A code written not for free beings, but for tools, for machines, for slaves. And yet they were not machines. This is what made them so terrifying. They still had the Force. They still felt the currents of life. They still sensed echoes of their former selves. But they could not act on these feelings, could not speak, could not rebel, could not escape. Their spirits were trapped inside of dying flesh, fused to metal, crippled by implants, and held in stasis between light and darkness. They were Jedi bodies with Jedi reflexes, but with minds warped into something that resembled a tortured droid. Their connection to the Force did not vanish. It decayed. It rotted. They drew on it wrong, like a song with only half the notes, like hearing your own voice through broken machinery. They were powerful, yes, but they were broken. And because they still had the light inside them, dying, suffocating, begging, they were one of the most spiritually disturbing things that a Jedi could ever witness. To confront one was to feel a pit open in the soul, to feel the nauseating wrongness of a being whose spirit was still present, still reaching, but unable to communicate. To a Jedi, killing one was mercy, freeing someone who had been imprisoned inside their own corpse. This is why their presence corrupted the atmosphere of the Vesa system. This is why the Jedi Master Nagani Zo's sanity broke. This is why the Force recoiled from the place. Because the Force is life, and the Sith Knights were life imprisoned. A violation of everything the Jedi believed. A mockery of the very word knight. That is why Darth Mekhis named them that. They are not warriors, cyborgs, or even abominations. They are Sith Knights, because in her mind, they were still knights, still Jedi, still wielders of the Force, but now they served her designs, her will, her genius, and her cruelty. Jedi who were saved, restored, alive, but spiritually gone. For Mechis, they were perfect, and she filled Vesa with dozens of these trapped spirits, as it literally became a wound in the Force, a place where a Jedi Master would lose his mind simply by surviving there. But all great weapons have a weakness, all monsters have a flaw, and all Sith, no matter how cold, how calculating, how brilliant, carry at least one wound that can be exploited. And for Darth Mekhis, that wound had a name, Satele Shan. The Jedi Knight who had stormed her fortress, shattered her defenses, humiliated her in single combat, and left her bleeding in her own command chamber. It was a moment that she would never forget and never forgive. Even during the Cold War, she built superweapons that would butcher fleets and sterilize worlds. The memory of Satele's lightsaber cutting through her defenses lingered as a burning scar. The hatred became a blind spot. And eventually, it became a weapon that would destroy her. After Master Nagani Zo escaped the Vesa system, injured, half mad, his memories fractured by years in shadow, the Republic Strategic Information Service finally understood the scale of this threat. The Sun Razer, the Gauntlet, the Silencer, the Shadow, the Ascendant Spear, the Javelin Dreadnoughts, and the growing army of Sith Knights. If the war resumed tomorrow, the Republic would not survive. Someone needed to destroy the Sunrazer, and that someone was Theron Shan, a man that did not have a connection to the Force. A man who by birth was Satele Shan's only son, conceived in secret, hidden from the Jedi Council, and abandoned to protect the Order. A man Darth Mekhis had no reason to fear, but a man who understood exactly how to exploit her. Theron and Master Nagani Zo infiltrated the Vesa system under forged identities, slipping through Mechis' perimeter defenses and entering the heart of her kingdom. Inside the Sunrazer station, Theron saw the unthinkable. The star harnessed and bleeding plasma into production rings, assembly lines building weapons that shouldn't exist, the twisted remains of cybernetic night conversions, halls where the Force was sick, heavy, and wrong. Even he could feel it. It was everything that Zo had warned him about, and worse. The plan was simple. Lower the Sunrazer shields, overload its internal reactors, and escape before the star-sized machine detonated. But none of that was possible without a distraction. That distraction came from one thing that Mechis hated more than anything: Satele Shan. Theron let himself be captured, dragged before Darth Mekhis in her control chamber, surrounded by Sith Knights, trapped deep within the most dangerous station in the entire Empire. And then he told her his name, Shan. For a moment, the first time in years, Mechis lost control. Hatred overwhelmed her logic. Old humiliation flared inside of her. The memory of Satele standing over her defeated body resurfaced like a fresh wound. Theron leaned into it. He told Mechis everything she wanted to hear. He fed her exactly the rage that she had buried. He implied secrets about Satele. He hinted at resentments. He planted lies. He wove half-truths. And she fell for it all. Consumed by hatred, blinded by obsession, Mechis reached out through the Force to probe his mind, convinced she would uncover some hidden Jedi weakness through the son of her old enemy. But Theron was not a Jedi. He was not Force sensitive. He didn't have Satele's memories. He couldn't be mind-read the way that Mechis expected. Instead, she probed deeper, and she found nothing useful. And in that vulnerable moment, Theron struck. He unleashed a toxic dart laced with toxic 10 poison, disrupting her nervous system and paralyzing her body. Stabbing her with it, the Dark Lady collapsed. The Sith Knights surged forward, unsure whether to kill the prisoner or focus on stabilizing their master. In a panic, fire sprung around the room, and for the first time since the Great Galactic War, Mechis was helpless. Theron raced through the burning corridors of the Sunrazer, lowering the shields and initiating a destruction overload. The megastructure began to tremble, warning sirens blared, containment rings collapsed, the star at the center surged with power. Theron escaped in Zo's waiting ship. The Jedi Master, though, sacrificed the last of his strength to hold off Sith forces long enough for Theron to flee the system. Master Zo died on Vesa, completing the mission that he had once devoted a decade of his life to. And behind him, the Sunrazer exploded. The blast tore through the Vesa system. The star ripped itself in two, consuming what remained of Mechis' superweapon factory, and Darth Mekhis, immobilized, poisoned, and abandoned on her collapsing throne, was swallowed by the inferno that she had built. The woman who could have ended the next war before it began, the only Sith whose mind truly rivaled the ancient Rakata, the puppeteer behind fleets of death. She was gone, not killed by a Jedi's blade, not defeated by the Force, but undone by her own hatred. Her obsession with Satele Shan, her inability to see through a simple deception, by the blind spot she never acknowledged. Theron Shan, a man without the Force at all, saved the galaxy from an era of superweapons. And with Mechis dead and the Sunrazer destroyed, the Sith Empire lost something far more valuable than a Dark Council member. They lost their future advantage. The next war would still be fought with fleets, not planet killers, with soldiers, not dreadnoughts, with strategy, not extinction. Because Darth Mekhis was the only Sith that was truly capable of building a second Starforge, and she was no more. In the vastness of Star Wars legends, there are Sith who dominate: Vitiate, Revan, Naga Sadow, Exar Kun, Valkorion. But then you have hidden names, the ones buried in codex entries, obscure missions, and side novels. Characters so subtle that you only realize their importance when you zoom out and look at the galaxy as a whole. Darth Mekhis is one of those names, a footnote in the grand histories, a hidden gem for deep divers of lore and fans of the Star Wars mythos, a character that you don't fully appreciate until you piece together what she actually achieved. Because the truth is almost funny, she wasn't special, not as a traditional Sith anyway. She didn't wield some sort of ancient cosmic power. She didn't hurl starships around. She didn't rip open planets. She wasn't some prodigy with a lightsaber. Her force abilities by all accounts were normal, below average, basic telekinesis, a working knowledge of force lightning, enough skill to duel defensively, but nothing compared to the monsters of her era. She was not anywhere close to the level of someone like Satele, and yet, she became one of the most important Sith in the entire galactic war. Why? Because Darth Mekhis represents something that the Sith rarely use. Pure logic. Not passion, not rage, not hunger for immortality or dogma. Just cold, efficient, terrifying intelligence. Not theatrics, not flair. No obsession with ancient tombs or esoteric rituals. Just results. That is why she rose to the Dark Council. Not because she was chosen by destiny. Not because she mastered some ancient technique. Not because she was born in a powerful lineage. She earned her seat by being too useful to ignore. Vitiate, the immortal tyrant who trusted no one, who micromanaged the very souls of his inner circle, needed her. He needed the sphere of technology to function at peak efficiency, and she alone made that happen. If Mechis had survived, if the Sunrazer had not been destroyed, if she had completed even half of her planned megastructures, the Sith would have won. Not through spirit, not through the dark side, not through their ideology, but through production, through industry, through cold, mechanical superiority. She was the rare Sith whose danger doesn't come from raw power, it came from the mind. And fittingly, the mind was also her downfall. The most logical Sith of the era died because she abandoned logic. She let her hatred for the Jedi cloud her judgment. She reached into Theron's mind out of ego and spite. She allowed herself to be baited, manipulated, and destroyed. A brilliant machine brought down by human error. Yet of all of her creations, nothing she created was more horrifying and more haunting or unforgettable as the Sith Knights. In a universe filled with monstrous fates, alchemy, mind control, hollowed spirits, corrupted souls, the Sith Knights may genuinely be the worst fate a Jedi could ever suffer. Because they weren't turned, they weren't converted, they weren't redeemed, they're broken piece by piece until they're still Jedi, but unable to act like a Jedi. Still connected to the Force, but unable to use it as intended. Still alive, but spiritually destroyed. Still themselves, but eternally silent. In the end, Mechis leaves us with a strange reminder that even in the darkest corners of the galaxy, even in the stories of monsters and war machines, there are lessons worth carrying with us. Because for every Mechis who twists life into something cold and cruel, there are heroes who stand against that darkness. Jedi who refuse to abandon hope. Ordinary people like Theron who would rise to extraordinary moments. And those who give everything like Master Zoe, ensuring that the galaxy will have a future worth fighting for. If you've made it all the way to the end of our journey, it's been an honor to have you here in the archives today. Thank you for exploring this hidden piece of Legends history with us. And wherever you go next, may the Force be with you.